Shabbat Shalom. This has been a big week for New York City, and it has been a complicated week for the Jewish people. Many members of our community went to sleep on Tuesday night feeling dread, feeling abandoned and alone, feeling like New York City has turned against us, that our city doesn't care anymore about the safety of the Jewish people, or doesn't believe that our ancient home deserves to exist as a safe place for Jews on earth. These members heard the mayor-elect find it difficult in some interviews to condemn Hamas or to speak in empathy about the victims of October 7th, or to clearly denounce anti-Zionist language that incites violence against Jews. At a time of shocking anti-Semitism on both the left and the right, many of our members feel that Tuesday's election was both a sign and an acceptance of that anti-Semitism. This week is the anniversary of Kristallnacht on Sunday. And I've heard from some of our members that this time feels to them like we're approaching 1930s Germany. If this is you, if this is how you feel, I want to tell you that I see you. I see how frightening that is. And I want you to know that you are not alone. On the other hand, many of our members woke up on Wednesday morning elated and full of hope, feeling that New York rose up out of cynicism and out of despair and came together to stand for an affordable city that includes everyone. They're feeling inspired that a diverse coalition of ordinary people beat back hundreds of millions of dollars spent by billionaires to defeat them. These members heard Mayor-elect Mamdani repeatedly and clearly commit himself to join with the Jewish community to stand against anti-Semitism in New York City. And they heard him specifically say, in response to fear that he might make Zionists unwelcome or excluded, that he would include Zionists in his administration and in his vision for New York. And in the middle, many of our members feel uncertain, deeply troubled by some of the things that Mayor-elect Mamdani has said or failed to say. And while many see him as anti-Zionist but not anti-Semitic, they're afraid that the coalition that elected him includes people who are both anti-Zionist and anti-Semitic, and that his victory will embolden anti-Zionists and anti-Semites. However, some of these members are simultaneously excited by his ideas and by the energy he's bringing to New York, and by his stand against corruption and his stand against the dehumanization which is characterizing the politics of our country and our city. These members have seen him listen to the Jewish community and care about our concerns, even if he doesn't totally get them. And they've seen him seek to understand and seek to work with us. This group might describe themselves as ranging from worried to cautiously hopeful. Now, this picture wouldn't be complete if we didn't add in our people's participation in two terrible and self-defeating dynamics of the last few months. First, several of the billionaires who funded the opposition to Mayor-elect Mamdani's campaign were Jewish, and the images and messages that came out of that campaign and that were promoted by many Jews on social media were deeply racist and Islamophobic. They darkened his skin. They lengthened his beard. They called him a terrorist. Their candidate laughed at the idea that he would celebrate 9/11. They purposefully mispronounced his name over and over again. They distorted his words. They took his words out of context. They lied about him a lot. They fearmongered. It was ugly and unacceptable. Any association that the Jewish people had with those distortions and those lies and that racism and that Islamophobia was shameful. And now the Anti-Defamation League has put out a statement promising that they're going to monitor Mamdani. Now, of course, it's their job to monitor anti-Semitism everywhere and at all times, so that wouldn't require a special announcement. This was a public threat to surveil the first Muslim mayor of New York City. And it was Islamophobic. And it was enacting the same exact fear that Muslims have lived with since 9/11. Second, the second big dynamic that we've been a part of is that the Jewish people turned against each other during this election. While perspectives in this moment didn't entirely run along generational lines, there are Jews of all ages in all of the groups I just described. What we just saw was the older generation of Jews turn against the younger generation of Jews. Older Jews were actually called upon directly and literally to try to change their children and their grandchildren. Younger Jews were cast as wrong, naive, confused, and insufficiently loyal to their people. This is a generational divide that is not new. We've been seeing it grow for decades. As establishment Jewish organizations have demonized young Jews who've grown up watching a settler movement in Israel that's out of control, who've grown up watching Netanyahu's corruption, who've grown up watching the growing politics of hate and dehumanization that's characterizing Israel, just as it is characterizing the United States, and who especially during the Gaza war could not square what they were seeing in Israel and in Gaza with the Torah values that they learned growing up. Many of them no longer believe that Israel should exist, or that Israel should exist as a Jewish state. And to those of us who are Zionists, myself included, those of us who refuse to give up on the dream of a Jewish and democratic state side by side with a free and equal Palestinian state, the position of many in the younger generation is devastating. Yitzhak Rabin was murdered 30 years ago this week because he came to understand that Israel's future had to be built not on endless wars and occupation, but on compromise and coexistence. And for many of us, giving up on that dream is not an option. But the answer cannot be to turn against one another. It cannot be for the old to turn against the young. In this week's Parsha, we have one of the best known and most troubling episodes. It's the Akedah, the binding of Isaac by his father Abraham. Many of us know it inside and out. Abraham hears a call from God to bring his son Isaac up to Mount Moriah as an olah. Vayomer kachna et bincha et yichidcha asher yahavta et Yitzchak v'lech lecha el eretz haMoriah ve'alehu sham leolah al achad ha'arim asher omar elecha. Take your son, your favored one Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the heights that I will point out to you. Hearing these words, Abraham didn't pause. He didn't talk to Sarah. He didn't even talk to Isaac. He thought God was commanding him to sacrifice his son, and he was willing to do it. And he brought Isaac to the top of the mountain and bound him and lifted up the knife over him until a messenger from God called out his name and told him to stop. But did he hear right in the first place? Did he correctly understand what God wanted of him? The commentator Bechor Shor says, Abraham thought that God commanded him to slaughter Isaac and to completely incinerate him. Hence he brought wood and fire and a knife with him, whereas God only commanded him to bring Isaac up on top of the altar. The word olah, burnt sacrifice, also means simply to bring up. And from when he brought him up, he had finished and fulfilled the commandment of the Holy One, Bechor Shor says. And he continues, and there are some who explain that nisa, the word used to describe this episode, which means test, also can mean lifted up. It meant God raised him and lifted him and made him known to the world how important he is. That is the correct version, says Bechor Shor. I believe, like Bechor Shor, that Abraham misunderstood his test. He correctly brought his son to the top of the mountain, but he incorrectly believed that our God would ever ask us to sacrifice our children. In fact, in Torah, our God is in clear contradistinction to Molech, the Canaanite god that requires child sacrifice. The point of this story is that our God will never turn one generation against another. Instead, our God seeks greater understanding and connectedness between the generations. As the prophet Malachi said, on the great and awesome day of Adonai, hearts of parents will be turned toward children, and hearts of children will be turned toward parents. You might say that since Abraham was prevented from actually sacrificing Isaac, no harm done. Except Isaac never forgot. Isaac, the Midrash says, was 37 years old when this happened. Isaac, the Midrash says, was blinded by the tears of the angels who witnessed the scene. Many commentaries see other scars on his personality from the trauma. After the episode, when Abraham leaves the mountain with his servants, Isaac isn't there, or at least he's not mentioned. Did he make the journey back with his father? We don't know. We do know that Isaac never again spoke to his father. We do know that Isaac went to live in a different land from his father. It even seems that he might have gone to live with Hagar and Ishmael, his father's other outcasts. And the next time Isaac had contact with his father, it was to bury him. Turning parents against children is no small matter. If we are hearing the call to do so, it is not God calling us. Caught up in our fear and our dread, we are mishearing the call. Instead, we need to pause. We need to stop before we do any more harm. The Jewish community has been turning the older generation against the younger generation for almost 30 years now. The Jewish community has been creating litmus tests and loyalty tests for almost 30 years. This approach has not only utterly failed to change the minds of Jews under 50, it has in many cases alienated them from the Jewish people. It has made many feel that they have no home in the Jewish world. And many have decided that if they're going to be called bad Jews or self-hating Jews, good riddance, they're going to walk away. This has gone on for far too long, and it must stop. It must be that instead we grow empathy for each other's perspectives, that we listen, deeply listen, not with the goal of convincing, but with the goal of understanding. And most importantly, that we insist on including everyone in our tent, that we insist on remaining a single community united across our differences. When we disagree, when emotions run high, here at CBE, we offer listening circles. We invite our members to listen to one another across our differences, whether those are generational or otherwise. We've been intentionally growing our ability to disagree and remain in community. I try to make clear whenever I can that our members can disagree with me, they can disagree with the other clergy, they can disagree with the other members, and they fully belong here. You fully belong here, no matter what you think. This is your home. There are no litmus tests here. There is not one right way. I just received a request from one of our members that we hold a post-election listening circle. That's going to reschedule that for a couple weeks from now. Look in the advisory. I think it's the 15th. Is that right? 22nd. He's good at that. In this time of extreme polarization, this might be the single most important skill for us to build. This month, we're also launching a year-long multi-generational dialogue on Israel and Palestine. And next October, I will be leading, along with our president, Leslie Lewin, and Rabbi Evan Trailer, an intergenerational trip to Israel and the West Bank, in which half of the participants will be under 40 and half will be over 40. This is the work we will do within our community. And what about with our new mayor? When Mayor-elect Mamdani visited CBE last month in one of the town halls that we planned for the leading candidates, almost 400 of our members attended, and they wrote 82 questions for him. We were able to ask 10. We tried to group them together, but half of these questions were about the governance of our city, housing, education, etc., and half of these questions were about the Jewish people, Israel, anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism. I asked the first question on behalf of the community, which was really more of a speech than a question. It went on for a very long time, as it encompassed the concerns of several dozen of our members about the phrase, globalize the Intifada. And I spoke passionately about what that phrase has looked like in the life of our community, from graffiti on the doors of our members' homes and of our synagogue, to firebombing in Colorado, to hostages held in a synagogue in Colleyville, Texas, to fear that someone's going to come into our buildings with an automatic weapon to kill us. And I asked Mr. Mamdani 4 specific questions about what he would do as mayor to prevent violence against Jews. And many of us did not feel that Mayor-elect Mamdani's response to those questions, was satisfactory. Though he did clearly condemn Hamas on October 7th in our town hall. Since then, a 2023 quote by him went viral. "When the boot of the NYPD is on your neck, it was laced by the IDF." When asked about it, he said he was referring to training exercises between the IDF and the NYPD, which did happen. But from the context of the clip, he seemed to be saying it with the goal of making the Palestinian rights movement more viscerally real for working class New Yorkers. I am expecting to have an opportunity to sit down with Mayor-elect Mamdani one-on-one in the next few weeks. And I will use that opportunity to tell him personally and directly what we needed to hear from him about Jewish safety at our town hall. And I will also explain to him why that 2023 quote is anti-Semitic and dangerous to us. It conjures the millennia-old and continually pervasive conspiracy theory that Jews are always there hiding in the background, causing oppression. That no matter who has their boot on your neck, it's actually the Jews behind the scenes who's making it happen. This is dangerous stuff, and it will not behoove us to ignore it or sweep it under the carpet. It must be denounced. I will also apologize to Mayor-elect Mamdani on behalf of our people for the vile racism and Islamophobia some Jews are directing against him. And I will talk to him about working together to ensure that our people's needs and interests are heard and met in his administration, and about working together for a New York that includes us and includes everyone. He has repeated again and again that he is committed to our full inclusion. He is committed to remaining in dialogue with Jewish leaders, and we will, of course, continue to advocate for our people. I want to see us in this new period begin a dialogue between the Jewish and the Muslim community. I want to see us create a new pact among all of the communities in New York who are vulnerable to violence, our community at constant threat of anti-Semitic violence, immigrant communities who right now are under assault by ICE, Asian communities facing anti-Asian harassment and violence, Black communities living with the ongoing scourge of racial profiling and racist violence, the trans community facing attacks on their rights and threats incited by the federal government, and the Muslim community who face Islamophobic violence at their mosques and on the streets. I have no illusions that we will agree about Israel, and we should not try. But we can agree that each of us deserve to live free of hate and free of violence in our city. And we can pledge to proactively keep each other safe. I believe that our mayor will want to contribute to the creation of such a pact. I'm not pretending that this will be easy, but after 2 years of devastating alienation, I think this is a moment to try, and I think this is an approach worth trying. Some people are declaring that this is the end of Jewish New York. But looking around our thriving community, the unbelievable growth at CBE that we are racing to catch up with, the breadth of exciting and engaging initiatives that happen here, and the thriving of our neighboring synagogues, and the minyanim popping up everywhere, and the energy behind the Center for New Jewish Culture, we know that this claim couldn't be farther from the truth. I see a Jewish New York burgeoning with life and energy and excitement and vitality, cultural and intellectual and spiritual expansion, and so much joy. I'm not saying it's simple or easy right now, or that there are no reasons to worry or fear. But I do believe that if we advocate for our people, as we will, if we enter into conversation with our neighbors, if we open up our tents wide, if we turn our hearts toward one another, parents toward children and children toward parents across our generations, that right here in New York, the Jewish people will continue to thrive. Shabbat Shalom.